Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruelest thing my wife ever did wasn't filing for divorce. It was the way she used my own love like a tool. The same day, she landed a $1 million contract. She hugged me in our townhouse in Prince George's County, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. I'm not dragging you with me." Then she slid divorce papers across the kitchen counter like they were a receipt and added, calm as stone, "And I'm not splitting what I earned." She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She smiled like freedom had a price tag, and she decided I was it. Here's how it happened. My name is Malcolm Turner. I'm a black man in my mid-30s, and I've spent most of my life believing that steadiness is love in its purest form. I work in logistics in Washington, D.C., the kind of job built on deadlines, routes, and quiet problem solving, moving things forward even when your own life feels stuck. I met Zahara Kincaid in Maryland when we were both hungry for a better future. She was smart, ambitious, and warm in a way that made you want to be better just standing near her. I didn't notice how quickly warmth can become a spotlight that only shines when you're useful. In the early years, Zahara and I looked like a team. We rented a small place in Hyattsville, ate takeout on the floor, and planned our lives like we were building something sacred. She wanted to start her own consulting business. I told her I believed in her, and I meant it. When she stayed up late polishing proposals, I brewed coffee and rubbed her shoulders. When she worried she wasn't enough, I reminded her she was more than enough. I thought marriage was a long hallway where you keep walking side by side, even when it gets dark. I didn't realize she was measuring the hallway for how much it benefited her. When our son Micah was born, my world narrowed into something tender and exhausting. I learned the weight of his sleeping body and the sound of his little sighs. Zahara loved him, but her love came with a timer. She'd cuddle him, take pictures, then hand him back when her phone buzzed. "I have to build," she'd say, like motherhood was a temporary pause, and I was the one assigned to hold the moment still. I took on more night feedings, daycare drop-offs, cleaning, because I believed sacrifice was proof. She treated it like background noise. Zahara's mother, Denise Kincaid, never hid her opinion of me. Denise lived in Baltimore, but visited often, arriving with perfume and judgment. She'd look around our home like she was inspecting an investment and say things like, "You're a good man, Malcolm." Stable. The word always landed like an insult wrapped in politeness. When I tried to talk about how tired I was, Denise would tilt her head and say, "That's what men do, isn't it? Provide. Don't make this about your feelings." Zahara never defended me. She'd just sip her tea and let her mother's words settle over me like dust. The turning point wasn't loud at first. It came in small rewrites of our history. Zahara started referring to my sacrifices as basic responsibility. If I reminded her I'd paid off her old credit card so she could qualify for a business account, she'd say, "That's what husbands are supposed to do." If I asked for a weekend that didn't revolve around her networking events, she'd call me negative. She began introducing me at gatherings in Silver Spring as Micah's dad, instead of her husband, like my identity was a footnote. I told myself it was stressful. I told myself we'd find our way back. Money changed the air in our house. Not because we had so much, but because Zahara started acting like money was a scoreboard. When her first big client signed, she bought herself a designer bag and called it motivation. When I asked if we could put that towards savings, she laughed and said, "You think too small." I was still wearing old work shoes, still driving a car with a dashboard light that never turned off. I didn't resent her wanting nice things. I resented the way she looked at me like I was the reason she couldn't have more, even while I was the one holding the whole household steady. Around the same time, Zahara began disappearing emotionally before she disappeared physically. She'd come home from meetings in D.C. glowing, texting on her phone in corners, smiling at messages she wouldn't share. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say clients. When I asked why she suddenly needed privacy to talk about clients, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Malcolm, you don't understand business." It was the first time I felt like she was using my decency against me. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband. I didn't want to police her. I wanted to trust my wife. I remember a night in late fall when Micah was sick, feverish, and clinging to me. Zahara had a dinner meeting in Arlington. I asked her to stay. Not demanded, asked. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You wanted to cancel? She said. This is why men like you get left behind. Then she put on lipstick while I held our sweating child, and she walked out. I stayed up all night, counting his breaths, waiting for his fever to break, and feeling something inside me shift. It wasn't anger yet. It was grief. The next day at work, I made mistakes. Small ones. But in logistics, small mistakes can grow teeth. My supervisor, Dwayne, pulled me aside and said, "You seem off." I almost told him everything. Instead, I said, "Family stuff." Dwayne nodded like he'd heard that sentence 1,000 times and didn't want details. I kept my voice level like I always did because I learned a long time ago that a black man's emotions can be treated like a threat. I swallowed everything and kept moving. Routes, schedules, invoices, while my marriage quietly stopped being a home and started being a place where I was tolerated. The $1 million contract didn't arrive like magic. It arrived after months of Zahara's networking. She'd mention one name often, Elliot Price, like he was a gatekeeper with a golden key. She said he was a senior manager at a large firm in Northern Virginia and that he believed in her. When I asked what kind of relationship they had, she gave me that tight smile that meant I'd asked the wrong question. "Don't embarrass me," she said. "This is business." I wasn't accusing her of cheating. I was asking for transparency. But Zahara treated transparency like an insult. I started noticing the way she dressed for certain meetings, more polished, more deliberate. She'd leave early, come home late, and sometimes her perfume smelled different, like she'd refreshed it mid-evening. Once, while she was showering, a message popped up on her tablet. "You're going to be unstoppable when you stop carrying dead weight." It wasn't from a client number. It was from a contact saved as... I stared at it until my vision blurred. Then I put the tablet back like it could burn me. When Zahara walked out in a towel, she saw my face and said flatly, "Do not start." The arguments that followed were quiet but cutting. Zahara didn't yell. She dissected. She'd say things like, "You're insecure, and you're lucky I've stayed as long as I have." When I tried to explain that I felt pushed out of my own marriage, she'd tilt her head and ask, "Do you hear yourself?" Like my feelings were ridiculous. Denise joined in when she visited, calling me emotional and clingy. They spoke about me while I was in the room, like I was furniture. Micah started watching us with anxious eyes, like he was waiting for something to break. I promised myself I would not let him grow up in chaos. That promise kept me quiet longer than I should have been. It made me accept crumbs because I was terrified of ripping the house apart. But the day Zahara landed that contract, she didn't just rip. She shredded. She came home radiant, waving her phone. "It's signed," she said, and I hugged her. I kissed her forehead. I said, "I'm proud of you." She let me hold her for a few seconds, then stepped back like my touch had served its purpose. And then she pulled the envelope from her tote. Divorce papers. No softness. No discussion. Just a decision. "Why today?" I asked because my brain couldn't connect celebration and abandonment in the same breath. Zahara shrugged. "Because I'm not splitting what I earned." She said it like she was ordering food. She said it like our years together were an inconvenient subscription she'd finally canceled. When I reminded her I'd paid bills while she built her business, she laughed once, sharp, humorless. "You did what you were supposed to do," she said. "Don't act like you're a hero." Then she looked past me toward Micah's room and added, "We'll work out custody. Don't make this ugly." Ugly. That word was the warning. Because by the time the sun came up the next morning, Zahara had already started moving like a person who saw me as an obstacle. She opened a new bank account and redirected deposits. She canceled the joint credit card. She texted me a list of rules for communication, like we were coworkers who didn't like each other. When I asked where I was supposed to sleep, she said, "Not here." The day after that, while I was at work in D.C., she changed the locks. I came home, tried my key, and stood on my own porch like a stranger. When I called her, she didn't answer. When I texted, she replied, "Pick up your things when I'm available." I won't tolerate drama. I sat in my car and stared at the windows of the townhouse we'd chosen together. The place where Micah took his first steps, the place where we danced in the kitchen once at midnight to a song Zahara loved. I felt something hollow open in my chest. I drove to my brother Calvin's apartment in Baltimore because pride didn't matter anymore. Survival did. Calvin opened the door, took one look at my face, and didn't ask questions. He just moved his gym bag off the couch and said, "You can stay." The first time I saw Micah after the lockout, it was in a parking lot in Laurel under a gray sky. Zahara stepped out of her car, wearing a cream coat and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She handed Micah to me like she was transferring property. My son clung to my neck, confused and quiet. "Daddy, why you not home?" he whispered, and my throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. Zahara watched us like she was observing an experiment. "Don't fill his head with nonsense," she said. "You chose this by being difficult." Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking, leaving me holding our child and a grief so heavy it felt physical. Denise called me that night from an unknown number. Her voice was calm, almost pleased. "I told Zahara not to marry someone who would resent her success," she said. I stared at the wall in Calvin's spare room and tried to keep my voice steady. "I don't resent her success," I said. "I resent being treated like I don't matter." Denise laughed softly. "You mattered when she needed you. That's life." Then she said the sentence that kept echoing in my head for weeks. "Men like you are stepping stones." She hung up like she'd delivered wisdom. Zahara didn't call to correct her. Zahara never corrected anyone who dehumanized me. The legal part started fast. Zahara filed for temporary support, claiming she had business instability despite the $1 million contract she'd been bragging about. Her lawyer sent emails with words like reasonable and amicable while attaching documents that felt like a slow robbery. Zahara wanted the townhouse. She wanted primary custody. She wanted me to keep paying the car note on the vehicle she drove to networking dinners. She wanted my paycheck to cushion her new life while she erased me from the old one. When I refused to agree immediately, her lawyer implied I was being punitive. Zahara texted me, "Don't do this. Don't embarrass me." I was breaking in private. At work, I moved like a machine. At night, I lay awake staring at Calvin's ceiling, listening to his building's pipes and the distant traffic, trying to understand how a person can love you and discard you without blinking. I missed Micah's bedtime routine. I missed the smell of my own home. I felt humiliated explaining to coworkers why I was sleeping on my brother's couch. I felt helpless watching my son grow, used to me not being there every day. And I felt something else creeping in, anger that had nowhere to go, because I couldn't afford to explode. I couldn't afford to be the stereotype someone would use against me. One Saturday, Zahara agreed to let me pick up a few of my things. She stood in the doorway like a bouncer while I walked through rooms that used to be mine. She'd already removed photos of us from the walls. The space looked staged, like she was preparing it for a new life that didn't include my memory. Micah sat on the living room rug, playing quietly, glancing up at me like he wasn't sure if I was allowed to be there. When I tried to hug him, Zahara said, "Don't make him emotional." While I walked into our bedroom to grab clothes, I saw my side of the closet half empty, like she'd been clearing me out in increments. She watched me with that same calm face, and I realized she wasn't hurting. She was done. On my way out, I noticed something on the kitchen counter, a stack of paperwork with the logo of a major firm. I didn't touch it, but I saw the words performance milestones and compliance review. My mind snagged on it, the way a thread catches on a nail. I worked with contracts in my field. I understood the difference between revenue and liability. $1 million contract can be a blessing or a trap, depending on terms. Zahara didn't know the terms. She knew the headlines. She loved the sound of 1 million. She loved what it made her feel like. She didn't love reading fine print. That used to be my role, quietly handling details she didn't want. That night, I opened my laptop and started looking at everything I could legally access. Our shared financial records, joint accounts, old emails tied to household bills. I wasn't hacking. I wasn't spying. I was trying to understand what she was doing with our life. I saw transfers I didn't recognize, payments to vendors, and a recurring charge for an office rental in Arlington. She'd never told me she signed a lease. The number made my stomach drop. Then I remembered the business line of credit. 2 years ago, when Zahara couldn't qualify a loan, she'd asked me to co-sign. Just to show stability, she'd said. Temporary. I signed because I trusted her. I signed because I thought we were a team. I signed because I loved her. The next week, I met with an attorney in Silver Spring named Alicia Rowe. She was black, mid-40s, composed in a way that felt like safety. Her office smelled like paper and clean coffee. She listened while I explained everything: the lockout, the sudden divorce, the $1 million contract, the temporary support request. I kept my voice level, but my hand shook. Alicia didn't react with pity. She reacted with precision. She asked for documents, dates, and messages. Then she said, I need you to tell me if you signed anything connected to her business. Any guarantees? Any loans? When I admitted I co-signed a line of credit, her eyes sharpened. That matters, she said. A lot. Alicia explained something I hadn't fully understood. If my name was attached to financing tied to Zahara's business, then any major contract might require updated assurances. Not because the client cared about our marriage, but because companies care about risk. Divorce changes financial stability. It changes household income assumptions. It can trigger compliance reviews. Alicia asked, do you know if her contract includes performance bonds or upfront costs? I didn't. Alicia nodded once. Then we find out legally, she said. Quietly. She warned me not to confront Zahara about it. People who have no remorse become reckless when cornered. Alicia said, let her show her hand. Let her show her hand. That sentence became my anchor. I stopped trying to get Zahara to understand pain because she didn't speak that language. I stopped arguing with Denise. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided my role was disposable. Instead, I focused on Micah and on the truth. I asked Alicia what I should do when Zahara demanded money or signatures. Alicia said, do nothing without counsel. Communicate only in writing. Be calm. Collect everything. It felt strange, choosing strategy over emotion. But it also felt like the first time I protected myself in years. Zahara, meanwhile, acted like she was winning a war she'd already named. She sent texts that sounded like orders. Drop Micah at 6. Don't be late. You're still responsible for half the utilities. You need to sign the updated guarantee if it comes. She kept using the word need like my boundaries were imaginary. When I told her I needed clarity about finances, she wrote back, you don't get to question me anymore. That's over. No remorse. Not even a hint of guilt. Just entitlement. It was like once she decided I was no longer her husband, she decided I was no longer human. The worst days were the ones with Micah in the middle. He started asking careful questions, the kind kids ask when they're trying not to upset adults. Is mommy mad at you? Are you coming back? Did I do something? I told him the truth in gentle pieces. You did nothing. This is grown-up stuff. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. Then I'd go back to Calvin's spare room and sit in silence. Because it's one thing to endure betrayal alone. It's another to watch it stain your child's sense of safety. Zahara never reassured Micah in front of me. She'd just say, he'll adjust, like he was a schedule item. One evening, Zahara called instead of texting. Her voice was sharp with urgency, not emotion. I need you to be cooperative, she said. My client's legal team is doing an updated compliance packet. They're going to send a document. Just sign it so we can move forward. There was her hand showing itself, exactly like Alicia predicted. I kept my voice steady. What document? I asked. Zahara sighed like I was stupid. A guarantee update. It's standard. Then she added coldly, if you mess this up, Malcolm, you will regret it. I felt my stomach twist, but I didn't react. I just said, send it to my attorney. Silence. Then a laugh. You're really doing this? She asked. You're trying to punish me. I'm not punishing you, I said quietly. I'm protecting myself. Zahara's tone hardened. You owe me, she said. You owe me for everything I put up with. You think you were supporting me, but you were holding me back. Don't get brave now. She said brave like it was an insult, like standing up for myself was an offense. Then she hung up. 10 minutes later, Denise texted from another number. Don't ruin my daughter's future. Men who can't lead always sabotage. I stared at the message until my eyes burned, then forwarded it to Alicia. I felt sick, but I also felt clearer. They weren't asking. They were demanding. They didn't see me as a person. 2 days later, the DocuSign packet arrived. Not to me, but to a shared email address Zahara forgot I still had access to. The subject line was something like financial assurance update. My name was on it. My signature line waited like a trap. The language was heavier than Zahara had implied. Expanded liability, personal guarantee obligations, references to performance milestones and penalties. In other words, if Zahara failed to deliver, they could come after the guarantor. Me. I didn't click sign. I forwarded everything to Alicia. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I exhaled, because now I understood the real picture. Zahara wasn't just leaving me. She was trying to keep using me while leaving. Alicia reviewed the packet and called me. Do not sign, she said. You are not obligated to sign a new guarantee simply because she wants you to. She explained that my old co-signing on the line of credit didn't automatically require me to expand liability for a new contract. And she pointed out a key detail. The client's compliance process required disclosure of material changes, like a divorce filing. Zahara filed the same day she signed the contract. That meant either she hadn't disclosed the divorce yet, or she disclosed it and thought she could still force updated assurances through me. Either way, she had built a tower on a foundation she no longer respected. Zahara called again that night. This time her voice was sweet, almost soft. Malcolm, she said, let's not be enemies. Micah needs us to be adults. I almost laughed at the sudden mention of our son as a bargaining chip. She continued, sign the packet. After that, we can finalize custody and be done. I won't ask for anything else. Her tone made it sound like she was offering peace. But I could hear the panic under it, the way her words moved too quickly. I kept my voice calm. I'm not signing anything without my attorney, I said. Zahara's sweetness vanished like a mask dropping. You are disgusting, she snapped. You're going to ruin my life because you can't handle a successful woman. I thought of all the nights I stayed up with Micah so she could build. I thought of the overtime shifts, the bills, the way I swallowed my own needs because I believed in the idea of us. And I realized Zahara had rewritten our history so thoroughly that she truly believed her version. In her version, she was a hero who escaped a burden. In her version, my support was nothing. My love was nothing. My humanity was optional. I can handle your success, I said. I can't handle being used. Zahara laughed, harsh and unkind. You were always useful, she said. That's why I married you. Then she hung up again. No remorse. Just the truth. Ugly truth, but truth. The next morning, Alicia filed a formal response to Zahara's attorney stating that I would not execute any new guarantees related to Zahara's business and that all future communication would go through counsel. It was professional, clean, and unemotional. Zahara responded like a person losing oxygen. She sent long texts accusing me of betrayal. She threatened to tell everyone I was abusive because when someone has no remorse, they also have no limits. She wrote, I will make sure Micah knows what you did. I forwarded everything to Alicia. Then I sat in my car outside work and shook, not from fear of Zahara's anger, but from grief that my wife could weaponize our child without blinking. The karma didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived like a corporate language. 3 days later, Zahara emailed me from a different account. Her tone suddenly formal. The client has concerns. They're requesting updated information. Please sign the packet to resolve this. I didn't reply. Alicia replied. Another day passed. Then another message came, shorter. This is time sensitive. Then another. If you don't sign, there will be consequences. I stared at that line and felt something settle. Consequences. Zahara had been handing me consequences for years, quietly, daily, without calling them that. Now she was afraid of consequences she couldn't bully away. A week after the packet arrived, Alicia received notice that the client was terminating Zahara's contract for compliance reasons. That phrase is a polite knife. It means they don't have to argue about quality. They can end it because risk does not meet standards. Zahara lost the million before she ever touched it. But the damage didn't stop there, because Zahara had already started spending like the money was guaranteed. She'd rented office space, hired contractors, ordered equipment. She'd posted vague celebrations online. She'd told Denise. She'd told friends. She'd probably told Elliot Price, whoever he really was to her. When the contract died, her plans didn't just shrink, they collapsed. Zahara called me immediately. Not sweet this time. Not angry either. Just raw panic. "What did you do?" she demanded. I sat on Calvin's couch with my phone in my hand, feeling strangely calm. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I didn't sign." Zahara's breathing sounded sharp through the speaker. "You knew this would happen," she said. "You wanted this." I pictured her standing in our kitchen weeks earlier, smiling while sliding divorce papers toward me. "Zahara," I said quietly, "you filed the same day you signed that contract. You changed the locks. You told me I was dead weight. I didn't take anything from you." There was a pause. Then her voice hardened into blame, because blame was the only language she trusted. "You ruined my life," she said. The next domino fell from a bank. Because Zahara's business line of credit was tied to projected income and stability, the contract termination triggered reviews. The bank reduced her credit and tightened terms. Vendors began demanding payment up front. One contractor threatened legal action over a canceled agreement. Zahara's office lease didn't care about her feelings. It cared about rent. She tried to renegotiate, but landlords don't negotiate because you are embarrassed. They negotiate because you have leverage. Zahara didn't. Meanwhile, she still had enough pride to pretend she was fine in public. She posted motivational quotes. She told people the contract shifted. Behind that, she was bleeding money. She blamed me for the blood. In court, Zahara attempted a new strategy: paint me as vindictive and unstable. Her attorney implied I sabotaged family income out of spite. That was the cruel irony. Zahara had tried to protect her money by divorcing me immediately, but now she wanted the court to treat her business as a shared responsibility when it failed. Alicia didn't argue loudly. She submitted evidence. The lock changed text. The message where Zahara bragged she filed so she wouldn't split what I earned. The threats to smear me. The emails demanding I sign new liabilities. The pattern of coercion. Facts don't need volume. Facts just sit there heavy. Zahara sat in court in a cream outfit, lips tight, eyes cold. No remorse. Just anger that reality wasn't obeying her. The judge didn't give speeches. Real life rarely gives speeches. He simply denied Zahara's request for temporary support at the level she wanted and ordered a fair custody schedule. He also clarified that debts tied to Zahara's business were her responsibility, because she repeatedly framed the business as hers alone, and because there was documented evidence, she tried to coerce additional guarantees after filing. The ruling didn't punish her with humiliation. It punished her with boundaries. Zahara left the courtroom with her jaw clenched, shoulders stiff, and Denise trailing behind her like a shadow. As they passed me, Denise hissed, "This isn't over." Zahara didn't look at me. She didn't need to. In her mind, I wasn't a person, just the reason she lost. After the ruling, my life didn't suddenly become easy. It became quieter, which is different. I still had to rebuild. I found a small apartment in Laurel. Nothing fancy. Clean, safe, close enough to Micah's school. The first time Micah came over for the weekend, he stood in the doorway holding his backpack like he wasn't sure if this was real. "This is home too," I told him. We built a bedtime routine from scratch. Dinner, bath, story, lights. At night, when he finally fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the silence. Quiet can feel like relief. Quiet can also feel like a wound you keep checking to see if it's still there. Zahara didn't stop being cruel just because the court drew lines. She started being cruel in smaller ways, like paper cuts. She'd show up late to custody exchanges and act like my time didn't matter. She'd send Micah in clothes that didn't fit and say, "I thought you could buy him what he needs since you're so righteous." She'd refuse to share school updates unless I asked directly, as if parenting was a privilege she could ration. Denise sometimes came to exchanges and stared at me with open contempt. No remorse, not even fatigue. They seemed fueled by resentment. I learned to document everything, not because I wanted to fight forever, but because I wanted to protect my son from the chaos they kept trying to create. The hardest moment came when Micah asked me, "Mommy says you don't want her to have money. He was sitting at my kitchen table eating cereal, eyes serious in a way kids shouldn't have to be. I set my mug down carefully. Micah, I said, I want your mom to be okay. I want you to be okay. But adults make choices, and sometimes choices have consequences. He frowned. Like when I spilled juice? He asked. I nodded gently. Yes, I said, but bigger. I didn't insult Zahara to him. I didn't need to. Her behavior would teach him more than my words ever could. All I could do was be steady. The same steadiness she called dead weight. At work, I started to shift too, not in loud ways, but in the way a person shifts when they stop carrying extra burdens. I took on a new project, managed a complicated contract, and impressed the right people without trying to. Dwayne noticed. You look lighter, he said one day, not knowing how much that sentence meant. I didn't tell him the details. I just nodded. I began saving again. Slowly, quietly. I rebuilt my credit. I paid down debts that had grown during the chaos. I worked out at night to burn off the anger I couldn't show. I found a therapist in Colombia and sat in a room once a week learning to name what happened to me without minimizing it. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was repetitive. It was boring. It was real. Meanwhile, Zahara's business continued to unravel because it was built on image more than structure. She tried to replace the lost contract quickly, but big clients don't trust desperation. The office lease became a weight. She started working from her car sometimes, then from Denise's house in Baltimore, telling people she was downsizing intentionally. I only knew pieces because Micah would mention it innocently. Mommy's house is different now. Mommy is always on the phone. Grandma says you're the reason. Every time I heard that, my stomach tightened. Not because I doubted myself, but because I hated that my son had to listen to adults blame instead of reflect. Zahara never apologized for putting him in the middle. Denise never softened. Their cruelty had no off switch. One afternoon, I got an email from a vendor's attorney addressed to both Zahara and me. My heart jumped until I read the details. They had pulled my name from an old record connected to the line of credit. Alicia responded immediately, clarifying that I was not a party to Zahara's new business obligations and that any attempt to connect me to those liabilities would be contested. The attorney withdrew me from correspondence the next day. I sat in my car after work, hands on the steering wheel, feeling the echo of what could have happened if I'd signed that new guarantee. Zahara would have left me and still tied me to her risk. She would have used my love until the last drop, then blamed me for being empty. The thought made my skin crawl. The next custody exchange was in a grocery store parking lot in Bowie. Zahara stepped out of her car and looked smaller than I remembered, still polished, still proud, but with a tightness around her eyes. For half a second, I thought maybe, finally, she would show something human. Maybe regret. Maybe acknowledgement. But she handed Micah over, then leaned closer and whispered, "You think you won. You didn't. You're still nothing." Her voice was calm, venom delivered like a casual fact. I looked at her, then at Micah climbing into my back seat with his toy dinosaur. I didn't respond. I just buckled my son in and closed the door gently. Zahara watched me like she wanted a reaction. I gave her none. Not because I was weak, because I was done giving her my nervous system as entertainment. That was the real transformation, and it was private. I stopped needing Zahara to validate the pain she caused. I stopped trying to convince her mother I was worthy of respect. I stopped bargaining with people who saw compassion as leverage. I focused on Micah. I focused on stability. On weekends, we visited parks in Annapolis, got ice cream, read books at the library. I cooked simple meals and let Micah help stir sauce, even if it took longer, because building a peaceful home isn't about speed, it's about safety. At night, I packed his school lunch carefully, the way I used to pack Zahara's hope into my hands and give it back to her. This time, I packed love for someone who actually needed it. Zahara's final attempt to control me came through paperwork again, because that's how she operated, through documents and demands, not conversations. She filed a motion claiming I should reimburse her for lost business opportunity because my refusal to sign damaged family finances. The audacity would have been funny if it hadn't been exhausting. Alicia responded with a firm, factual rebuttal. I had no legal obligation to assume new liabilities for Zahara's independent contract. Her decision to file for divorce and alter household stability was hers. Her attempt to compel my signature after locking me out demonstrated coercive intent. The court dismissed the motion. Zahara didn't show remorse afterward. She didn't say, maybe I went too far. She just shifted to a new story where she was a victim of my control. People without remorse don't learn. They reframe. The karma, in the end, wasn't just the contract. It was the exposure of who she really was when she couldn't get what she wanted. Zahara wanted the glory of independence while still feeding on the support she despised. She wanted to be free while still chaining me to her risk. When the legal system and corporate compliance said no, she had no character left to lean on. Friends who'd cheered the million-dollar headline disappeared when the money disappeared. Denise remained, but Denise's love came with bitterness, and living inside bitterness is its own punishment. Micah told me one night, small voice in the dark, "Mommy cries in the bathroom sometimes." I felt a flicker of sadness, not for Zahara's pride, but for the part of life that could have been different if she'd chosen humility. Then I remembered, she chose cruelty on purpose. My success didn't look like revenge. It looked like peace. I got promoted quietly and took on a role that let me work partly remote. That meant I could do more school pickups, more doctor visits, more ordinary moments that matter. I didn't announce anything. I didn't post. I didn't need anyone clapping. I opened a savings account labeled Micah and contributed every paycheck, even if it was small. I paid off the last share debt Zahara tried to leave hanging over me. I replaced my old shoes. I bought a sturdy couch for my apartment so Micah and I could watch movies together without sitting on folding chairs. I started sleeping through the night again. That was a miracle I didn't know I missed. One day in early spring, I ran into Elliot Price's name again, not through gossip, but through a professional email chain at work. He worked in a partner network tied to one of our vendors. I stared at his name for a long time, remembering Zahara's secret smiles and that message about deadweight. I didn't confront him. I didn't email him. I didn't need answers from a man who wasn't part of my healing. Whatever he was to Zahara, he had served his purpose. He had fed her ambition and validated her entitlement. And when the contract fell apart, he didn't save her either. That was another quiet piece of karma. The people who encourage you to discard loyalty rarely stay when consequences arrive. Micah's teacher called me one afternoon to say he'd been quieter lately. My stomach tightened, but I didn't panic. I asked questions. I listened. That evening, I sat with Micah on my living room rug and let him talk. He admitted he felt like he had to be extra good, so adults wouldn't be mad. My chest ached. I told him, you don't have to earn peace. Peace is something grown-ups should give you. We made a small chart together. Feelings, words to use, ways to ask for help. It wasn't dramatic. It was parenting. It was the opposite of what Zahara and Denise practiced, control without care. As Micah leaned against me, I realized this was my real victory, breaking the cycle privately in my own home where it counted. Zahara never stopped blaming me. Even months later, she'd send short, bitter texts about expenses, about schedules, about how everything would be different if I had acted like a man. I stopped responding emotionally. I responded with facts. Dates, times, receipts. When she tried to provoke me in person, I kept my voice calm, because calm isn't weakness, it's discipline. Over time, she grew less explosive, not because she became kinder, but because she realized my reactions were no longer available. People like Zahara feed on access. When you remove access, they starve. Denise kept her contempt, but Denise's contempt could no longer change my life. It was just noise outside my door. The last scene that stays with me happened outside Micah's school in Hyattsville. Zahara arrived late again, eyes tired, makeup perfect but strained. She saw me and looked like she wanted to spit fire, but Micah ran to me first and hugged my waist. Zahara's face tightened. Not remorse, something else. Maybe envy, maybe regret she would never admit. Micah looked up at her and said, "Mom, you should stop being so mad. The honesty of a child is a mirror adults hate." Zahara's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't apologize. She didn't soften. She just said, "Get in the car, Micah." But for the first time, she looked unsure. And I understood something important. Karma isn't always loud. Sometimes karma is watching your own child prefer peace over your pride. I drove home that day with Micah singing softly in the back seat, a little off-key, happy in the way kids can be when they feel safe. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. I felt free. Zahara filed for divorce the day she landed a $1 million contract because she thought she had finally outgrown me. What she didn't know was that her million was never just money. It was risk, compliance, liability, and accountability, all hiding behind a headline. She tried to cut me out while still standing on the foundation I helped build. When I quietly stepped back, the structure revealed what it truly was. And the best part is this: I didn't have to destroy her. I just had to stop bleeding for her. If this story hit you, like this video and subscribe for more real, grounded endings. And if you want the next one, where the cheater tries to rewrite the story in court, click the next video on screen. Don't just watch the ending. Next story, play button, watch the ending.